Let's drive across America, we said.
Let's do a road trip to see America's art.
We'll crisscross the country visiting great galleries and great buildings.
We'll meet artists and curators and a painting elephant.
And we'll see roadside attractions, oddball collections, all kinds of Americana, and a roller coaster.
This is Mame McCutchin.
This is Charlie Luxton.
And together we're going to travel 10,000 miles across America, taking in more than 25 states and a couple of cities in Canada.
And what do you need for a road trip like that? But 35 feet and 11 tons of art bus.
Of course you do. This is America.
This is ARTLAND, USA. This is ARTLAND, USA.
A mammoth road trip crossing the United States, looking at the best of art and architecture.
So far, this lady's taken us 9,000 miles.
And in this show, we're starting in Boston and we're heading north.
In this show, I meet one of America's most influential artists, see some very good art, and marvel at some very bad art.
And I look at something ecclesiastical, something fantastical, and something that my mother warned me about.
It's the final week of our Pan-American road trip. From Boston, we head inland before making for the border, this time to Quebec. Finally, we kick for home and end our trip in magnificent Maine.
Downtown Boston, in the rush hour, in a 35-foot RV, it's not the easiest place to be driving. There's some monkey trying to change lanes. Well, he's chucking a Yui. Well, this guy's gone crazy. Woo, go, buddy! But we're on our way to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. Now, this has a kind of a mythical place in the architectural world for pushing the envelope, for challenging what architecture can be and will be. Founded in 1861, MIT is a private research university whose vision is to bridge the gap between technology, design, and commerce. Judging by its own architecture, it's a place that practices what it preaches. Showing me around is Mitch Joachim, MIT architectural guru and all-round nice guy.
Yeah. The campus has evolved starting from a charrette or a design workshop where they got a group of master architects together in one room and redesigned the whole campus. Then these architects went out and each one of them took a specific building and did that building. So now, 3 or 4 years later, you can see the result of that charrette that happened.
I assume that this incredible piece of architecture behind us is a result of that.
Yes, that's a work by Stephen Hall. It's a dormitory called Simmons Hall.
What are the principal ideas that Hall is exploring in this building?
Well, rumor has it he started off with a sponge. And he thought in this sponge he's going to look for portions that are porous, or he came up with this concept called porosity. And he looks for space inside the sponge, and then he extrapolates that, makes it into rooms, either auditoriums or places for the students or cafeterias, etc. So what he did is he took a grid, a highly regularized grid.
Which we can see expressed on the surface here.
Yeah. The floor slabs are connected at regular points. I believe every 11 windows or so, you'd have a new floor slab. And then he cuts away from those floor slabs and finds these exciting spaces. And he's calling it porosity.
And he's giving it a good name.
Yeah,
that's the secret of architecture, isn't it? It's a good name.
And exciting spaces.
Wow, look at that.
So this is the auditorium.
What an extraordinary space.
And here's a perfect example of one of these sac forms cut out of the sponge to get this notion of porosity, or these hidden spaces within the grid.
It's good, isn't it? It is good.
Yeah, but you could see that there is some conventional things, like the seating is just flat slabs, the floor is straight, and the ceiling, as you can see, is also flat. It's just the space carved out in between floors is where he can put the funk in functionalism.
That's a great phrase.
Don't use it.
A short walk across campus lies an equally impressive MIT building, the Stata Center, designed by Frank Gehry. What's driving Gehry to create these forms?
I think it's his playfulness. It's his signature kind of approach, which is manipulating pieces of cardboard, paper, what have you, and just working through an expression. In this case, he was thinking of, I think it was either dens of wolves or monkeys, to reflect on how the individual, there's many different faculties in there, how they would kind of compete against one another.
So the different shards of the building are supposed to represent in some way the different faculties inside of it, and the tussle, the intellectual tussle going on between them.
Yeah.
This is really moving away from a rational, super rational modernist tradition, isn't it?
I guess so. It depends on how you define rational. If you think of the school of thought that a pure white box is exactly that, it's pure and it's white. Listen to that kind of cultural influence you're telling yourself. I mean, why does white have to be a pure color, and why does a box have to be considered a pure geometry? It's just a geometry. No more different than a blob is also an equal piece of geometry, and it could be a black blob.
But do you see this building as being part of a tradition that will live on?
I think it's essentially Gehry's signature architecture. And it's basically about his ego and his interest in space and material. It's a one-of-a-kind prototype.
Incredibly, Gehry is not only designing buildings, he's collaborating with Mitch and the team to rethink cars for the cities of the future. It's not far short of redesigning the wheel.
You can imagine these cars behaving in flocks, or in herds, or parliaments. Because they're omnidirectional, they move on a dime, they spin about the city. It's not like your normal linear travel. So when you move, you can kind of have a gentler congestion.
Is that how it then starts to relate to architecture in the city at large? Is that at the moment the city is defined by roads, effectively, isn't it? You know, the corners available, straight lines. You're saying that by rethinking this car, giving it the ability to move any way, you could then completely rethink the city.
Yeah, you radically rethink the infrastructure. Instead of cities being designed around cars, cars are designed around cities.
Do you think these ideas are going to be accepted by the motor industry?
Well, that's a good question, because we want to showcase the car in a venue that would get the biggest results. So it's kind of the question, do we bring it to Detroit, to a motor show, and show it to a bunch of car enthusiasts, or do we take it to something like an art gallery for the world stage to kind of review? So I think we're leaning towards the latter, which is bring it to an art gallery and show it off as a piece of art that will influence the city.
And if Frank Gehry and Mitch ever feel like redesigning the RV, they know where they can find us.
We're taking a short journey south of Boston to Dedham, Massachusetts, and to something you wouldn't expect to find in the local movie theater.
For the first time on this trip, I'm actually a little bit nervous to be walking into a museum. Why? Because I'm afraid I might like some of the work.
Now, usually you find restrooms inside museums. Here, it's the other way around. Founded in 1993, the Museum of Bad Art showcases the awesomely awful and the gruesomely grim.
Louise, what possessed you to open a museum of bad art?
Well, I was one of 5 people, and we found a painting that was, so bad it was good. You couldn't throw it out because it was so remarkably bad. And when we started to talk about that, we realized that if you're walking past some art galleries with a group of people and someone says, "Hey, look at that," there's a good chance that it's really terrible. And
Why is that?
Because people love bad art. And if you look around here, there are a lot of things that need to be saved and exhibited and celebrated, and that's what we do.
Oh, Okay, so what's so bad about Id and Ego of Gina?
The Id and Ego of Gina is a portrait. This is actually a portrait collection that we have up now. And what's going on here is this is somebody who's got very little idea about anatomy, but is fascinated with breasts, and that's not unusual in bad artists.
What about Drool Bunny in October? That was spelled with the German October.
Yes, Drool Bunny was submitted by the artist, and that's another thing that's really interesting. When we started this, we were surprised when we started to have artists submit their own works. And it took a while for us to figure it out, but what we understand now is that artists want people to see their work. So if they send it to us and we accept it, then they can say they're in a museum, people are seeing their works, we're acknowledging that they did something worth paying attention to. If we don't take it and send it back, they can say, well, I guess I wasn't so bad, the Museum of Bad Art turned me down.
Win-win.
Exactly.
What is it about bad art that like people just are so crazy about it?
It's fun. And people, you know, if you go into the Museum of Fine Arts, there are paintings there that you've been told are fine paintings and they're classics and they're masterpieces. And if you disagree, you're likely to be intimidated by that. Well, with our art, people can come in here and have their own opinions, come in and say, well, I don't think that's so bad. And it just frees people up. One thing that does happen is people will come in and look at our art and they'll say, well, I really like that. Well, we like it too. We think it's a different thing.
You don't want to hang it in your house.
Well, you don't necessarily want it in your house. And you can agree that it's really bad, but we like it.
This place is fantastic. I never realized that bad art could be so good. Charlie!
You guys are I know.
On this trip, we've been exploring some of the very best of America's art. But we've also been exploring the murky boundaries of art through folk art, roadside art, and actually just some downright weird art. But I've come to just outside Boston to find out more about what some people might consider to be a very extreme art form, but one that has a surprisingly rich history. Tattooing has been in practice since Neolithic times and has served all sorts of functions, indications of status, spiritual devotion, bravery, and love. Today, tattoos are more decorative than anything else, though the practice was illegal in Boston until 2001.
Someone will come in with an idea, they'll bring references or not, and then we go back and forth, you know, finally refining a design that they'll be comfortable and happy with to live with the rest of their life.
Because that's the rub, isn't it? This thing's going to be there until the end of your days, Bobby.
Yeah, that probably is.
So you want to get it right, I assume.
Yeah. That would be nice.
I've always painted. I started painting when I was a kid. I got my first set of oil paints when I was 12 years old, and I've done a lot of informal education with art. I studied painting, printmaking. I also studied the figure for many years.
So anatomy. Do you think that's an important part of tattooing, is understanding anatomy?
Absolutely. If you don't understand anatomy, then, you know, placement of the tattoo can be pretty difficult.
So it's not only about how you draw, let's say, an animal figure or a human figure on the body, it's how that pattern also relates to the material you're applying it to, the musculature of the body itself.
Yeah, when you apply a tattoo, you want to make sure that it accents the form of the body. Otherwise, it just kind of looks out of place.
How do you feel about the fact that the tattoos and artwork that you do will stay with someone for the rest of their lives?
It's a really great honor to know that when somebody specifically searches me out to do a tattoo that will last for life, it makes me so happy. It's what makes me come to work every day.
Theory over, it's time to learn firsthand what tattooing is all about. Well, I now know a whole lot more about how tattooing's done and where it came from. Is it art? Yes. Is it good art? Well, for me it seems such a highly personal form of expression that it's not really for me to judge. However, you can't question my commitment to art and to Artland. You didn't really think, did you? No, come on, you wouldn't. From body modification to ecclesiastical architecture in 5 easy miles. I've come to talk with Kathy Asabo-Bachman about a masterpiece of American architecture, Trinity Church. Designed by Henry Hobson Richardson and built between 1872 and 1877, the building caused a sensation when it was opened to the public. What was so innovative about this building that meant it had such an effect on the architectural establishment?
First, it was Richardson's masterpiece. This is what established his career. And Richardson, of his generation, was the first celebrity architect, the Frank Gehry or Daniel Libeskind of his day. The other reason is this building jump-started or established the Richardsonian Romanesque, a new style of architecture in America that was so popular for a time, it was simply known as the American style.
So this was a turning point when America stopped being so Eurocentric and started defining itself by its own creativity or its own art styles.
Exactly. The Richardsonian Romanesque was the first American architectural style to be imitated by Europeans. What he did that was new for America and new for Europe is he took the style and he really made it his own. He simplified it. He made it more expressive. So he took the round-headed arch and he enlarged it and enlarged the openings for stained glass, so that these buildings could highlight this new American form. So he took it, simplified it, made it bolder, fresher, American. This was the first time in America where art and architecture were designed as a unified whole and executed by American artists and an American architect.
Who were the artists that worked inside the church?
The primary artist was John Lafarge. His goal was to elevate mural painting to a fine art. And in order to do that, he used artists instead of artisans. Unlike a typical American church, gray stone interior, whitewashed interior, very simple, you'd walk into Trinity and it was envisioned to be an experience as if you're walking into a painting. Every surface was decorated and planned that way by this partnership of clergy, artist, and architect.
Immediately next door is the elegant John Hancock Tower by master modernist M.I.T. It's designed quite literally to reflect the beauty of Trinity Church. This for me is such a quintessentially American view. The corporate tower and the lovely jewel-like church. Nowhere else in the world would these two buildings come together so closely and complement each other so well.
We're leaving Boston and heading west to North Adams. As tiredness sets in, the map jokes get worse and worse.
You rolling?
Yeah.
I need a new dress. I think there's enough fabric. What do you think?
That's a
Is my Alaska showing?
Mate, that's the map. You just crushed the map. You got VPL?
What?
VPL?
What's that?
Visible Pennsylvania line?
That was really bad.
That was really bad, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it's good. I love it.
This is North Adams, Massachusetts. Its population may be a light 15,000, but with the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art, or MoCA, the town is fast becoming a cultural heavyweight. Built on the site of an abandoned mill, MoCA is an artistic factory dedicated to presenting new work across all media. Curator Susan Cross has agreed to take me around their current retrospective by Wang Yongping. They consider his work of such note that they're going to let the show run for an entire year.
Wang Yongping is a Chinese artist who has actually lived in Paris since about 1989. And a lot of his work deals with his own experience of straddling two cultures of East and West. This piece was actually inspired by a story of King George V, the British king who, when in Nepal, shot, I think, 4 to 5 tigers at a time on a hunting trip. And when Wang Yongping learned of the story, he recreated it, recreating the Indian elephant and the seat that King George would have sat in to shoot the tiger. But here, instead of the tiger being on the ground, he's alive and attacking the missing hunter. So he's reversing the role of hunter and hunted.
I see a sandcastle back here. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, it's called Bank of Sand, Sand a Bank, and it's actually 20 tons of sand. We had to shore up the floor to hold it. It was the original Hong Kong Shanghai Bank building that was built in the colonial era. And then under the communist rule, it was the municipal government building, and then now it's the Pudong Development Bank. So it's always had this very authoritative position in the city. And of course, Wang Yongping has made this bank of sand, something that's vulnerable and it's crumbling before our very eyes. So he's questioning that authority, and I think also this idea of permanence.
What is it about his work that warrants 2 floors, huge exhibition space, and a full year of show?
Well, his work really speaks to this global era that we're living in and looks at how different cultures and peoples get along and also don't get along. And he's really investigating how this connected world is also still suffering from so much conflict. A lot of his work is very political and very loaded, but he shows us these stories with such sensitivity and humor, and the work is so visually engaging. It really draws you in and makes you want to learn more about what you're looking at, and I think that's what makes him so important. We're the largest contemporary art center in the US, and this is our largest gallery within our complex. And as you can see, it's the size of a football field. And a large part of our mission actually is to give artists a platform to make new work, new commissions, and to let them work on a scale that they often can't in other museums. So most of the work here is made for MoCA, as is this work by Karsten Haller. It's called Amusement Park. Aptly named, but of course an amusement park is usually really fast and amusing, but here Karsten has slowed the rides down to an almost imperceptible speed. And where normally these rides would shake your body, it's a real visceral experience. He likens these to a mind shaker. It's really about your psychological reaction as much as your bodily reaction. And it's often unsettling to walk through the park and you're expecting one thing, and some people don't even know if the rides are moving, and I've seen couples get in arguments about whether something's moving or not. So he's actually a scientist by training, and he moved into the art world afterwards. And I always liken his installations to a scientific laboratory, and we're almost like his lab rats. And he doesn't have an end to the experiment. You know, any way we react is what he's looking for, but it does have that investigative kind of feel.
Mass MoCA is a sensational space for displaying art. Rather than the accepted neutrality of a white room, it allows a context for artists to react against, and a scale that challenges the most ambitious of artists.
Now, I've got a bit of a confession to make. I've come back to Canada. Now, I know this goes against the general spirit of the show being called ARTLAND USA, but I couldn't really help myself. This time, I've come to Quebec, and I've got 3 reasons for doing this. 1, the pastries. 2, the great coffee. And thirdly, to check out Montreal's vibrant public art scene. And it's a story that starts about 40 years ago, here in the Metro. Taking me through the turnstiles and telling me about the underground art scene is the art critic of Montreal's cultural weekly, View magazine, Nicolas Mavrakakis. So why have you brought me here to talk about Montreal's public art?
Because the construction of the subway station in the 60s represents a very important moment for public art in Montreal. Artists like Mousseau, who did this station, had an opportunity to make a statement. They had the feeling in the 60s that painting, sculpture was dead, and that they should turn the page. So suddenly they wanted art for everybody, the rich, the poor also. And what is a better place to make art for everybody than the subway?
How was this new public art received when it was finished in the late 60s?
Strangely, very well. Many art critics like it very much. But strangely also, after that, we didn't take care of it very well. In the station, at the beginning, you had 54 big circles like that. 17 are missing now. So public art is a paradox. It's like we want it, we don't want it. We like to see it, to embellish the city with it, but we don't look at it. Public art is a history about blindness, disappearance, and destruction.
Montreal's public art frenzy spread to other metro stations, including Marcel Ferrand's glass window at Champ-du-Mars. Today, the city is filled with some of the most distinctive public sculpture in the Americas, including Le Voie Lactée by Geneviève Cadieux, which hangs above the Museum for Contemporary Art. So important did the government now consider public art that it insists 1% of the budget of each newly commissioned building is invested in artworks.
So this is one of the latest pieces to go up in Montreal.
Yeah, it was made 2 years ago by Nicolas Bayer for Concordia University.
And is this piece approved of? Is it liked by the general people? I don't know how you call them, Montrealians? What do you call people from
Montréalais.
Montréalais. Do they like it?
They like it very much, but there's a funny story about it. It seems that they are going to construct a building just in front of it.
Here?
Yeah, just here.
Where this little one is?
Yeah, and
they're going to build a tall building there. That seems a bit stupid.
yeah, and the city of Montreal so accepted that building, but they are going to accept the other one just in front of it. So one end is doing something and the other end something else.
So there is still a lack of cohesion in the thought process. So on one hand they are supporting art, on the other hand they're paying for it and then covering it up.
We'll see. The artist is complaining about it. The university is not happy about it either. So we'll see. But I'm afraid that
commerce will win.
Yeah.
One last stop on the tour, and it's Colonne Allégorique by Melvin Charney. Charney's work embodies much of the conflicting attitude within Montreal's public art initiative. Having seen the government tear down his commissioned work for the 1976 Olympics, he was asked to contribute to this new sculpture park only 10 years later.
It strikes me that contemporary and public art is actually very political here. It's been very politicized in Montreal.
Always, yes. But we have a particular situation with the language, the French language. So there is always a debate about art and the use of art, the meaning of it.
Why do you think that's? Because of the French culture specifically, or maybe the outsider attitude of Quebec?
Because maybe we need to have a definition of ourselves. We don't know exactly who we are, so we need that kind of discussion.
You believe that this public art has become central to this discourse about what you are, where your place in Canada and the world is?
Yes, especially that because sometimes we are afraid that public art is going to send a wrong image about us. So each time that we are producing public art, we want it the best, but what is the best? We don't know exactly what is the best to represent us, I mean.
So it's so loaded. Every piece that you do is so loaded with identity and political meaning that there's an enormous amount of tension around it.
Yeah, big tension, because each time we think, well, is it really what we are, what we want to show about us right now or not? So it's never going to please everybody at the same time. It's not possible.
It's a compelling story, and I can think of no other city where the role of public art is taken as seriously as it is here in Montreal.
We put our passports away for the last time as we head back to the US and to Maine.
There's a meeting at work, you gotta see this. This is the producer trying to talk Charlie through one of the stories that he's gonna be doing.
I don't understand the thing, it's just one of those basic.
Maine is one of the most beautiful states in the whole of America. Best known for lobsters, and now, to me at least, for lakes. But it's also the home of some of the last remaining members of a religious group that have had an enormous impact on design, and especially interior design. And they are the Shakers.
Founded in 1747 and originating from Manchester, England, the Shakers are so called because of their violent bodily agitation during worship. I'm in Sabbath Day Lake, the only remaining Shaker community, and I'm here to meet Brother Arnold Had, one of the last 4 Shakers in all of America. I want to learn how such a modest community has had such a huge impact on the world of design.
So what's the purpose of this building?
This is the meeting house, which was constructed for public worship, which means that people from the outside world were allowed to come into this building and attend worship with the community.
And other than that, this was the public face. This is where everything beyond the private life of the community
Exactly.
happened.
Only they could go into the trustee's office and this building, and that was it.
Lovely. It's wonderful, isn't it?
It certainly is. It's the architectural jewel of the community.
So it has this very stripped, simple interior style that is so kind of quintessential of what I know about the Shakers. Mm-hmm. Where does that idea come from, that design agenda?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't know that anyone can give you a definitive answer on that one, but the concept of it was to strip away all the superfluities of the world, to get it down to its actual basic need. And that's what you see in Shaker architecture, Shaker furniture, Shaker style from those early years. And so by stripping those things away, you put them into the proper prospect that a chair is a chair. It isn't necessarily something that you need to possess, enhance, view as a great possession, but just it's a simple device in which to sit on.
I've always understood it, that in some way the making of beautiful things was inherent with the Shaker belief system. Is that completely wrong?
Completely wrong. And I mean, it depends on having a good craftsman to be able to articulate that, remember. That's what it's all about. We're not really a society of furniture makers. We're not a guild. We're a religious community, and we've always done a lot of different things. It depends on people's time and skill level, whether you're going to see beautiful things or not so beautiful things being made, and it depends on where you are.
But was not the aesthetics of that part of the kind of daily ritual, and therefore of the kind of religious belief or the religious order? Am I grasping at straws here to try and believe there's some... Because I think I've misunderstood it. I think I've fundamentally misunderstood what Shaker is about.
I think you've been purposely misled. The thing that kind of bothers me is that you see the same 100 pieces shown over and over again in every single book from the 1930s to today. And yeah, they're very fine, but there's a much larger work out there that they chose not to show because they're not as aesthetically pleasing. Shakers really did view furniture as furniture. We wanted it to be good, we wanted it to be useful, and certainly they kept it up. When they had something new made for them, they appreciated that. And that's why you can look at a piece of furniture that was made here 150 years ago, and it's still in beautiful condition with its original surfaces and all of that, because it was appreciated. This was the common room that was mostly just a passing hallway when the ministry lived here.
What are the things in here that were designed and made specifically or unusually designed by Shaker community?
I'd say an oval box. That is definitely something that is uniquely Shaker in design. And that's with the joints, those overlapping joints, which we call fingers. And they were sold as pantry boxes. They were sold in what we call sets or nests. They'd be 3 to 5 in a set, and they'd fit all inside of each other.
How do you feel about the fact that the Shaker tradition has been almost sanitized and sold as a false reality?
Oh, I like that word sanitized, because I think that's just about what it is. It's been streamlined and sanitized and put out as pablum for people in a lot of ways. The problem is that it follows in the footsteps of one person, really, Dr. Edward Deming Andrews, who was a pioneer collector. And he wanted to take it well beyond collecting. He made it into a business, and he reinvented the Shakers and presented it to the world. And then he started doing exhibitions and writing books. And everybody else took that as a primary source instead of a secondary source. And so they built it all on him, and that whole concept of design, that whole concept of the Shakers being nothing more than a bunch of furniture makers comes out of what he started.
It's really refreshing when you have your preconceptions exploded. And I thought I knew all about the Shakers. I'm a designery type, I must have done. I thought they were some kind of design-obsessed society that was about minimalism and paring down. But actually, the truth is they were just a pragmatic community of people getting by, and good design was just a part of that survival, of that existence. Now, the truth behind Shakerism is far more interesting than the myth.
While Charlie catches up on his Z's, we hit Portland, Maine's largest city. I have an appointment at the library to see one of the most unusual art projects I've ever heard of. Shh.
We're here with Michael. He's a librarian. He's going to tell us where we are and why we're sitting on a pile of books.
We're here in the basement of the Portland Public Library in the midst of all of these crappy books that are getting ready to either be sold or destroyed. I'm just totally fascinated with the fact that, like, these are books that have been withdrawn due to be really destroyed. And through the reclamation of art and artists, they become reborn.
Almost 200 artists from across the United States are involved in the Altered Book Scheme, which transforms unloved books into works of art.
What we did is we had what we called the big book grab. We basically took like all of these books, and they're all like spread out like all throughout the Rhines room. And then like it was just a free-for-all. Artists were just coming in, loading them up with little red wagons and all that kind of thing. And then we gave them 3 months basically to create the books. And then we had all the books brought back here to the library, where we totally freaked out like the tech services department.
So you had to get a code on every one of those pieces of art in order for them to be checked out.
Well, of course, that's the nature of the library science aspect of the whole project. I mean, the thing that we were really careful about in creating this thing and in prepping the artist for it is that it's sort of an unusual thing. Because if you think about our concept of art, it's generally hands-off. You know, it's behind glass in a gallery, don't touch. So the first thing that artists had to wrap their heads around is the fact that, like, you know, these books are going to be checked out and they're going to be manhandled. And, you know, there's probably going to be somebody eating like a slice of pizza and they're going to, like, spill something on their precious art. You know, there's that sort of thing that you have to get over. I mean, it's like, you know, librarians, you're sort of taught to, you know, books are sacred, like, you know, don't do anything. And we actually had like
stick them in the corner. If no
yeah, exactly, and throw them in the dumpster. But, you know, so I do think it takes like a little bit to, like, you know, get people to understand it, like, you know, to give them license to actually, you know, number one, like, you know, mess with the tenets of library science, and number two, like, mess with the concept of, you know, what exactly is art.
To talk me through her favorites is the project's curator, Adrienne Herman.
This one is a piece by Megan Dunn, and it's a bracelet. If you would like to try it on, it's very stylish.
A little impractical maybe for a cocktail party, but what are some of your favorite pieces here?
I'm particularly partial to this one. This is the Holy Book. Kind of turned this book into Swiss cheese.
It's a cookbook. It was a cookbook.
Yeah, it was. This one also actually is pretty interesting, the 10-minute Sharpie race. So you see here, this was the winning Sharpie pen, and this artist took 17 Sharpie pens and just let them stain and mark the book, and then you get these kind of Rorschach effects.
Wow.
And as you go through I'll speed it up and give away the ending, where this is the one that had the greatest resilience and lasted longest. So that's the 10-minute Sharpie race. This one, this was an artist who took all these books and shot them. You'll see
with a gun?
Yes. So you've got some bullet holes there.
What kind of caliber are we talking about here? I don't know. What's the public response been
We have a sense of that because we've been asking people to fill out questionnaires. It's been really interesting. We've gotten some interesting critiques. Someone said, you know, a certain piece seemed a bit derivative. So we were excited that people were being honest.
The critics are out there.
Yeah, the critics are out there, and they're not just saying, oh, isn't it great that art for the people and all, that they're actually looking at the pieces and really assessing them and giving feedback.
What do people get out of having something for 3 weeks? So it's a piece of art, you love it, you take it home, you have to return it in 3 weeks.
I know, sometimes it's hard. I've had some out that I actually have to admit I've had to pay some late fees because it's hard to part with them, but I think there's something really beneficial about having a piece of art in your home for what you know will be a short period of time, because you really, you look at it a lot and it becomes a kind of heightened experience, whereas if you buy something and you hang it on your wall, it's great and it supports the artist and you enjoy it over time. But sometimes I notice that the things on my own wall I stop noticing. They become kind of background. So when I have, you know, this piece out by Croce-Anciola, I put it on my coffee table and I really look at it a lot and it feels kind of precious.
I'd like to check this out.
Okie dokie, take care of that for you. This will be back on the 3rd of August.
The Artland art dog. Do you think Seb would let him on? Ian, sorry, you've been replaced. I don't think he can hold a camera though. I don't think Seb will let him on the RV. No pets allowed.
We're nearing the end of our mammoth journey across the states, and I just have time to visit one last artist. He's Winston Roth, and if he's about one thing, he's about colour. I've come to his home and studio to try and get beneath the brushstrokes.
Winston, I've looked at some of your work upstairs in the studio, and it seems to be a very stripped, abstract work. How would you describe it?
I'd say that's a pretty good description.
What do you want me to feel when I look at your works?
I don't want you to feel anything. I want you to feel whatever you do feel. I mean, it's not specific that I would like you to feel something. I expect you will feel something. And so whatever it is really up to you. It's not up to me. It's between you and the painting. In fact, I'm not interested in hanging on the wall. It's the painting that does the work.
Say that again. You're not interested in hanging on the wall, i.e. telling?
No, I don't hang on the wall. It's not me there. It's the painting. So I get out of the painting. I paint myself out of the painting so that it can be free to just do its thing, whatever that may be.
Can we go and have a look at some of the pieces and tell me a bit about how they developed and how they painted themselves?
And they're not on canvas.
Oh, right, okay. Standing here, I really get a feel for what you're talking about, the layering of pigments that you're doing in these different areas. So how many layers might go down onto a typical panel?
It depends on a lot of factors, but a good number. I don't
50,
count.
100?
Well, in a bad way, yes. But I think that I like to get them to where I'm not counting layers, I'm just going with the flow.
When you're creating work that, if you like, gives somebody so much space, as a viewer, can I read these paintings incorrectly in a way that you don't intend?
I'm interested in your first experience of the work, you know, what you get out of it. And I've had people look at my paintings and be completely voided out by them. I mean, I've had people look at them and say, well, there's nothing there.
How do you decide when they're finished?
I don't decide, they do. They just stop, you know, they get to a point where, okay, that's enough.
And you're happy?
Not always, but you know, if it's interesting, it's enough. Usually I'm happy, yeah. I mean, what is happy when you're painting? You know, I'm happy to be done so I can get on to another one. I just like to keep it rolling.
I'm on my way to see Robert Indiana, who's an artist who lives on a remote island in Penobscot Bay off the coast of Maine. Normally I would take a ferry, but since we don't have time, I'm taking that. Robert Indiana is a difficult artist to pigeonhole. Associated with the pop art movement in the 50s, Indiana's work is often far more emotional and referential than that of his contemporaries. Perhaps he's most famous for his sculptural poems and one form in particular, love. He now lives in the tiny community of Vinyl Haven in a remarkable lodge, formerly owned by the Society of Oddfellows.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
This is the Star of Hope, and this is where the Oddfellows used to hang out for over 100 years.
So it was a meeting house?
Yes, a lodge hall.
Lodge.
Mm-hmm.
Look at all the prints on the wall. I've never seen a giraffe in boots before.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be there, but that's all right. We'll go this way.
Oh, wow. What a phenomenal building. And how long have you lived here? This is home, right? This is...
I came here in '69. Moved here permanently in '78.
Have you been in this building the whole time?
Yep.
And what's the significance of the numbers?
The significance? What is the significance of numbers?
Well, of these numbers, of like, say, number 5, you have...
We are driven and wrapped around and submerged and submersed in numbers. I mean, from the day of our birth on, you know, license plates and year of birth and age and anniversaries and centuries and years. And so instead of painting trees as a landscapist, I decided to paint numbers and words.
Do you have a favorite number?
2.
Number 2?
2, it's necessary for love, you see. Rather difficult to think of love without 2.
Do I need a password?
You need the password, and of course you know what the password, it's love.
It's wow.
It's a wow room.
Oh my gosh. This is amazing. What was this room used for?
It's a ceremonial room.
What kind of ceremonies took place here?
Whatever they did, I'm not sure. Obviously, they thought rather highly of themselves. One of my most recent loves is the marble love, the original solid aluminum love, ahava, the Hebrew word for love, and then of course this is the polychrome, which is in many, many different places, different sizes, all over the world.
And what about this?
Oh, that's what the Oddfellows bedeck themselves with, and just for fun, once in a while, I pretend I'm an Oddfellow.
What's it like to be the creator of an icon that's recognized worldwide?
Well, you see, a lot of response early on was not very favorable. Like the museum world and so forth was not ecstatic about the love, and much of that was due to all the unfortunate rip-offs that took place. It began to have a bad odor, you see, and that greatly affected my own feeling about being an icon. You know, people would walk out of the room. I mean, you know, there comes Indiana. Ah.
Really?
Oh, sure. This is my main working studio. Most of my paintings have been done here.
Fun place to work.
And of course, Maryland is one of my favorite paintings. This is one of the peace paintings I had a show in New York.
How come the peace signs are upside down?
Because they're diving in despair, they're plunging in confusion, they're tumbling in terror. That's why it's upside down, you see. Head over heels in desperation. It's a little tricky right here because there's not anything too steady to hold on to.
You can be the steady thing that I hold on to. How's that? Perfect.
You made it.
How would you sum up the life of an artist?
It's interesting that you should ask that, because my own feeling is the life of an artist is probably 2 or 3 times more interesting than his work. And one can certainly think of people like Van Gogh and Gauguin and Picasso and all those guys. Absolutely fascinating lives, living in marvelous studios, doing marvelous antisocial things, and that greatly appeals to me. I'm not as interested in their work as I am in their lives, and this is my own focus. I would like to be living the life of an artist, and I hope I am.
So when I get to New York and people say, who was Robert Indiana? What was he like? What kind of response would make you happy?
Well, tell him pretty weird, pretty weird.
That would make you happy?
Positively.
Weird? Maybe a little, but so much more than that. It's a memorable last stop on our Artland journey.
So we've done what we set out to do, and we've seen a lot of incredible stuff. Great art, amazing architecture, wonderful journey.
10,000 miles by horseback, airplane, helicopter, bicycle, canoe, carveboard, Segway, and of course our faithful RV.
Look, call me crazy, but what would it be like crossing the states the other way? I mean, how long does it take to drive from, say, Miami to Alaska?
A lot less time if you let me do a little more of the driving.
How can you say that? You did loads of the driving. I tell you why it took so long. If you learnt to read a map, and if you could find the overdrive button, I reckon we could shave days off the time that it took us to get across this time. And anyway, I think I was the one who went fastest down that hill, coming out of New Mexico, wind behind us. I got up to like 85 miles.
To quit your job and live the life you've always dreamed of? You're really living the dream, I would imagine, the expat dream.
I feel more free here than I do in the States.
This is it, man. This is the life. Join me, Savannah Jane Buffett, as I follow 2 buddies from college who quit their grueling office jobs and moved down to St. John to be bartenders in paradise. Now they're not just serving drinks, they've created the #1 microbrew in the Caribbean.
I looked out and there's about 30 cubicles. And at that moment, I said, I can't.
I knew I wanted to roll the dice and that I wanted to take a break from what I was doing. Nice place to live, don't you think?
Not bad.
It was a very surreal feeling because this is all new to me. This was going to be my new home. At that point, we knew we were all in.
They're the lucky guys, man. They make beer for a living on an island.
It's just 2 guys hanging out in the Caribbean and brewing some great beer and, you know, living the dream, I guess.